Good morning everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on PopCross Studios. Now, you're probably wondering, hey Fox, why are you so big? That's because I'm trying to do something and that a few other YouTubers have done. Well, when they pause a video, they put their face up big to kind of draw your attention to them. And don't worry, I have a way of making it small without making it obvious. Anyway, today we're here to check out a brand new video from PopCross Studios. He, as Benny Sharp, will explain the lore of the multiverse, which is good if you miss kind of a few cities like I have. So, let's hop in and see what we can learn today. Alright, Benny, take it away.
Howdy do, folks. Good old non-canonical Benny Shop here to explain everything you need to know to get into Multiverse Tales and other PopCross original series without having to go back and watch and listen to literally hundreds of hours of stories and lore that's up on this channel, out on Spotify, and released as novels.
Exactly.
Whether you're new to this channel, ain't watched in a long time, or you just need a refresher, this should give you all the info you need to be caught up. This is coming out just before 2 new original series.
Something actually kind of interesting is that we saw the guy, I'm sorry, I'm kind of blanking on his name. We saw him rigging the skeleton for this brand new Benny shop that allows him to move and all that. It's not full animation, but it's pretty damn good.
Start up Mytholethal Pantheon Reapers and the Book of Bayou Knights, and
Nice.
this will cover all the relevant lore for those and the biggest plot points from the history of Multiverse Tales.
Sweet.
Pantheon Reapers is going to have plenty of involvement from some of my team of buddies on the shop gang, and Book of
Mostly
Bayou
these two.
Knights might be more relevant to the future of Multiverse Tales than you might think.
Ooh.
I ain't gonna give a rundown
Okay.
of every character in PopCross Stories, cause that'd take forever, but if someone hasn't shown up in a story in a while going forward, there will be enough exposition in that story to explain who they are and what their deal is when they do show up. If you
Right.
need to know them for the story to make sense. If they're just passing by to wave or something, they probably won't get explained. PopCross was gonna run this little shindig himself, but let's face it, all you lovely folks out there is gonna find it a lot more entertaining to have good old Benny Shop hash this whole thing out over
Hell yeah.
PopCross.
Hey, I don't know if it's universally true that people like listening to you more than me.
Oh yeah? You want to put
It's
out a
funny.
poll and ask them, see who they'd vote for between me and you?
No.
Great, then let's get into this, shall we?
Let's
Like
go.
my ma always says, ain't too smart to hold up the start. I mean, that's one of the less goofy little phrases of hers, but what do you want? Not everything she says is a goof and a gag.
Yeah, I mean,
now,
that just makes
on
sense.
with part 1, important lore and the main Multiverse Tales timeline. Give me a big flash.
Like he said, part 1, and I do already have part 2 up and ready for recording. But that one will be going up Friday. And yes, I know that there's going to be even more. I did see that clip of him preparing the animations for part 3.
Expensive part 1 title, PopCross. Great. Thanks for that.
Love you too, Benny.
Most of what I'm starting with
Okay,
here was revealed
okay.
in Chapter 7 of the Mythology Action Adventure series Mytholethal,
Mytholethal.
the sequel of which, Pantheon Reapers, is going to be starting up soon. The Eldrin Multiverse... Okay, whoops, that name was actually revealed in the Trismegistus Academy, but what do you want? Lore drops have happened at weird times.
Yeah, that's
Anyway, the
fine.
Eldrin Multiverse, where Multiverse Tales takes place, was allegedly created by the 7 Archons, or Archon Demons as they're more often known today.
Yes.
They created it from a non-physical reality by channeling the powers of a being called the Demiurge, who a lot of folks in the comment section seem to be assuming is some big scary freaky dude, and that always gives PopCross a good little chuckle.
Nah, it's probably going to end up being more like that giant turtle from the It series.
Benny, this is past lore. Don't give away future stuff.
Alright, sorry. 7 Archons, allegedly channeling the power of the Demiurge, created the Eldrin Multiverse, which nowadays contains roughly 26,000 universes.
Oh,
all
wow.
labeled by a letter of the alphabet followed by 3 numbers, like A016, M308, S316, and so forth. The Archons
Oh,
could have made
okay.
every universe a paradise if they wanted to, but they was like, snuff that noise. The souls who incarnate into physical reality is gonna want some challenges, so life ain't boring. So things like paying taxes and unskippable YouTube ads, you can blame them for that.
Damn you, all
It
cons!
would be really funny if that worked out the way I planned. Anyway, they also created
Unfortunately.
Overseers, who are a pretty important story mechanic in Multiverse Tales, but so far as we know, they ain't a thing outside the Eldrin Multiverse. There ain't no mention of Overseers in Vigilance or Stasis Psyche. Overseers
True.
are beings with glowing runes
True.
on their arms that grant them some ability to manipulate the energetic structure of their universe. Their powers can range significantly depending on the person and how long they've been an overseer and trained with their abilities, but broadly speaking, they have a halted lifespan or control over their age, power to manipulate the weather in their universe,
Correct.
the power to open portals between universes, the power to make something called an overseer's bond, which I'll explain later, the power to create new life and creatures for their universe.
If I remember correctly, I believe an overseer bond is just how you pass on the overseer energy or whatever. It's been a while.
And the ability to grant some of those creatures in life with
Maybe it's
something
just a
called
deal.
a soul energy, which each overseer has a limited supply of. See, all physical matter is made up of a combination of different energies that some folks like overseers can manipulate and construct into new living things. But those beings and creatures they make might as well be like artificial intelligence if they ain't given a soul energy, which is this golden energy usually found near the heart energy of a being's energy structure. Some beings and creatures can also spontaneously develop a soul energy, but so far as we know, there ain't nobody in physical reality who can just decide to make a soul energy. Other than, I guess, by two people deciding to have a kid. Two folks with soul energies making a baby is a pretty safe bet that the baby is gonna have one. Not that most folks even know this is a thing. With that said, there is speculation that this golden soul energy ain't actually a soul itself, but is more like a beacon which allows a soul to be channeled into a physical form. Meaning just because something has a soul energy doesn't necessarily mean that it has a soul. But we'll learn more about that in Pantheon Reapers. Don't say it, Pop. I know, no future lore. From the name, you'd think that Overseers was supposed to protect and watch over their universe, but the leader of the Archons, Eldrora.
I mean, technically, yes, an overseer can do that, but the moment a person, an average guy, is given the powers of a god, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, you'll get the guy that wants to protect the world and save humanity, and then you get the guy that wants to go all Lex Luthor and decide, I am Supreme Emperor of God.
Has admitted that really Overseers was just kind of another thing to provide some interesting little flavor and maybe challenges for their universe. Lots of Overseers wound up being pretty shady, power-hungry goons who abuse their abilities.
Easily.
Not all of them, but lots of them. Overseer powers can be passed on from one person to the next if the Overseer decides to give up the abilities, but if an Overseer dies while they got the Overseer energy in them, then that universe just ain't got an Overseer no more. The energy gets dispersed. Which ultimately is probably a good thing for the universes that it happened to. And nowadays it's happened to a lot of them, but we'll get to that later in Dressy's storyline. So the Archons like a good show. Even now that they're canonically in physical form, which again we'll get to later, they will often make decisions based on what will be exciting for them to watch or to experience, not based on what's actually good for them or the folks in the Eldrin multiverse. The Archons was pretty satisfied for a while just watching and making stuff for the Eldrin multiverse from their non-physical reality. But eventually they was convinced by a plucky little gal named Tassa that they should get to come in and join the party, pop on into physical reality. Also by plucky little gal, I mean a jacked power-obsessed overseer. The Archons had reached out to her because she was a real tough cookie of an...
If she wasn't evil, she'd be someone's kink. And with her being evil, she is someone's kink.
Overseer, and they wanted her to switch over to another universe and become the God Overseer of M308. Sorta. I'm really skimming through this bit, but we'll cover it in more detail in my summary of Mytholethal later on. Tassa basically tricked the Archons into both making her the God Overseer of M308, a realm full of mythological deities who have Overseer-like powers themselves, and tricked them into creating an artifact for her called the Multiversal Orb. It was essentially like an 8th Archon, or made the wielder in physical reality as powerful as one. Using it, she said she was going to make the Archons physical forms, since they can't do that for themselves. But then she just didn't, because Tassa's a real gem of a gal. She just wanted the power of an Archon for herself. When they realized they was betrayed by her, they tried to send a being to kill her called the Reaper, which is a being that is surprisingly even more dangerous.
Wait. The Archon sent the first ever Reaper after her? Huh. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting, considering that the Reaper's whole purpose is to kill the Archons, remove them from their physical bodies.
Than its name implies. This thing ain't just like a Grim Reaper for people, but for whole universes.
Oh,
If an
damn.
overseer
Okay.
gets a little too spicy with the creatures they're creating and makes stuff that leaves their universe and starts threatening other universes of the multiverse, and whatever this thing is too tough to be stopped by normal means, then the Reaper goes in and takes out the overseer of the universe that these creatures are spawning from. Because when the Reaper kills an
Right.
overseer, that also ends up killing every single living thing connected to that being's overseer energy,
Oh,
which generally means
okay.
it wipes out their entire universe. And that includes creatures that is from that universe but might be out popping around to other universes. And the Reaper is
Oh,
also
wow, it's
an
been a while
incredibly
since I've seen
powerful
that.
being that's almost impossible to kill. Though depending on how long someone has had the Reaper powers, they might have trained more or less and be more or less powerful. The first Reaper was basically on par with an Archon's powers, but since
Hell yeah.
Tassa had the multiversal orb, she was too, and she was actually able to fight with the Reaper for a good long while until a funky little coincidence occurred. A gal over in another multiverse named Chanel,
Oh,
who can
crap.
channel the powers of superpowered beings from other times and realities, unknowingly stole the powers of the Reaper to help out her buddies in the finale of Vigilance, just as the Reaper was mid-battle with the scary muscle mommy Tassa. That gave Tassa
Crap.
the opening she needed to kill the Reaper, or the person who usually had the Reaper powers. Then Tassa used the multiversal orb to seal Dimension M308 with her inside so the Archons couldn't watch all the fun dictatory stuff she was up to. Now normally,
that's
if someone
cold.
kills the Reaper, they then take on the powers and burden of the Reaper themselves. But since technically when Tassa killed the Reaper's rings and powers was off in another multiverse, so she didn't get to squiz those powers for herself, and when the rings returned to the Eldrin multiverse, they just went off and found someone else to wield them like a spooky cursed Green Lantern ring. The Archons did still
Nice.
manage to get some help on
Okay.
the inside of M308 to dethrone Tassa, but after briefly losing it, Tassa managed to find the multiversal orb again and ended up wreaking all sorts of havoc across the multiverse later on. Like becoming the overseer of Dresden Oakland's dimension for a while,
Oh, well,
Dimension
crap.
S316, and running his universe's version of the SCP Foundation, where Dreszy worked. And by running it, I mean running it into the ground, and letting crazy dangerous
no
entities
doubt.
stop popping up and leaving the universe, to a point where the new Reaper at this point had to drop into S316 to wipe out that universe. Unfortunately, Tassa saw that
So it looks like there's been at least 3 repos since the start of the multiverse, it seems. Okay.
coming and forced the overseer powers of that universe onto Professor Dresden Oakland, a hard-working, monotone SCP employee. He'd spent his whole life trying to protect his world by helping the Foundation contain and study anomalous, freaky, and spooky entities while keeping them away from civilian populations. When he found out
Yep.
the whole Foundation he dedicated his life to was run by someone who didn't give a rip about his world, then she forced the Overseer powers on him just as the Reaper was coming to kill the Overseer, and left Dreszy
No,
with a
wait,
pretty
crap,
bad case
hold
of
on.
pavement face. He understandably had a pretty big grudge against Overseers. The Reaper did take some
Oh,
pity on
yeah.
him though. She let him live and keep his Overseer powers, but still wiped out every other living thing in his universe through him. Is taking pity on someone the right term for that?
Whoa, wait, so that's what happened? And the Reaper went there, found out what happened to him, and was like, alright, and I'll let you live and keep the power. In exchange, boom, Thanos, Mega Thanos. Goes, nothing remains in your universe except you. Damn, that's cold.
Probably not, but it's what happened. Anyway, after an understandable bout of depression, Dresden started popping around the multiverse and realized that lots of Overseers was just as irresponsible, or downright terrible, as Tassa. So he decided to spend the next few thousand years, up until the point where the main Multiverse Tales stories happen, using his halted Overseer lifespan and other abilities to try and take out all of the Overseers. The way
Well,
he
as many
planned to
as he
do this
could.
was with a thing I mentioned earlier, an Overseer's Bond. 2 Overseers can make a dealio which energetically binds them together. Basically, they make a bond, one does a favor for the other, and if the other doesn't then repay the debt when requested, that person gets a real fierce, painful scar on their face. The pain
That's
goes
what it
away
is.
eventually, but the scar won't, and a lot of Overseers was pretty vain, so not something they'd be big on. Since Dreszy Boy's universe was empty and he was real good at containing dangerous entities, he decided to make this big fun prison planet thing that other folks would generally
Back
refer
Cells.
to as Backcells Prison. Inspired by the Backrooms for PopCross's Backrooms Entities as Supervillains episodes, in which Jake Tajin, On Offense, and Unkillable Kate first showed up. We
Unkillable
probably
Kate.
should have
Cool
included a
name.
summary of that series in this episode, but this little ditty is way overstuffed
Yes, I remember, Kate. It's just been a while, like they said.
as it is, so we're glossing over it. Sorry, folks. That series is only 5 episodes long anyway. You can just go watch it if you want.
Yeah, put it in
anyway,
the
if an
background.
overseer had some creature or being in their universe that they couldn't deal with or was risking getting the Reaper sent on them, then they could make a bond with Dresden to get that thing locked up in Daxel's prison in his universe, which itself was also locked off to other overseers and basically to anyone less powerful than the Reaper. Dresden's plan was to make bonds with every overseer in the multiverse, call all of those deals in at once to bring other overseers into Daxel's prison to help him with something,
okay.
quote unquote. Then once they was all in there, he'd blow up the entire planet with all the overseers inside. About
Damn.
20 years before he put this plan into action, he also became all buddy-buddy with this spooky little cross-legged float-sitting gal named Fear herself, or the Demon Queen of Dimension 667.
Or, as her real name is, Arava.
Nowadays, she's better known by her birth name, Arava.
Hey!
She was an overseer who was also not a big fan of other overseers, and said she was down with Dressy's plan. But really, she was just using him while concocting a little plan of her own. I mean, they did also become friends, but mainly she was kinda using him.
Yeah.
Sophia herself
Yeah, they were
was
kinda
the
using each
overseer
other.
of her world for about 700 years or so, and in that time she got convinced that if someone's life sucked, the only way they could get back on track for a good life was to send a freaky demon after that person that specifically triggered their greatest fears. If the person overcame their fears, then great, they lived a good life free of fears after that, and the demon left them alone. If
Truly
not,
wonderful.
they became a red smear on some nearby surface while getting shreds of their bones picked out of a demon's teeth.
Yeah, they died.
Fear herself got cocky enough to think that she should take this little show on the road and make every universe get subjected to that same thing. And she was gonna do that with a little help from our good buddies, the Archons. They reached out to her with the hope she'd help them get physical forms like Tassa was supposed to give them. Fear herself was on board, but in order to do that, she needed the multiversal orb, which at the time they didn't know where it was, and they didn't know that.
If I remember correctly, I think that was actually shattered in the fight at the end of Mytholethal into just multiple fragments. But maybe then again, I think Tulsa gathered all the pieces and just booked it with them. I honestly can't remember. It's been a while.
Soon it would be split into 4 pieces and scattered across the multiverse.
Oh, there it
So
is.
to understand how that happened and how Fear ended up getting her little mitts on it, we gotta circle back to what Tassa's been up to since she kicked off Dresy Boy's story out.
Ah, well,
After
thank you.
ditching Dresden's dimension, she was hopping around the multiverse doing who knows what, probably terrible stuff for a few thousand years, and was bringing along with her a party of deities from other realms. Tassa's got a real thing for mythological gods and worlds who have them. And somehow she always ends up with a version of Zeus in her party.
Yeah,
Maybe
always a
that's lore
Zeus.
relevant. Maybe we'll find out later. Anyway, with this little party of hers, and with the multiversal orb, she decided to settle down in dimension A016. The dimension where nowadays me and all my multiverse jumping super buddies in the shop gang have our base of operations. But
Ooh.
we wasn't a team back then. Tassa became the overseer of A016, probably using the power of the multiversal orb to steal it from whoever was the overseer at the time.
Yeah, I can
and
see
she
that.
was A016's overseer for a good long while, but also at some point in running that dimension, her little party of deities dispersed, and one of those pals, Lucifer, did something to really tick her off. We still don't really know what that was, but she decided to create a pocket dimension attached to A016 that some folks call Hell, and locked Lucy away in it. Tassa did the overseer
look
thing
at that.
solo for a while, running a world that's pretty similar to the one you listening live in. Basically all plagues and wars and stuff like that was set in motion by Tassa over the centuries just to enjoy the show. Cough, like the Archons would do. Cough, they probably have more in common with Tassa than they'd like to admit. Cough, cough.
Yeah.
But eventually she decided to retire, which frankly seems out of
good.
character for her, but I'm sure Pop has a great reason to justify why she did that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll have a reason if I need one and it becomes lore relevant in the future.
Great. So Tassa managed to find a delightful
So she just kicked up her feet and just chilled?
little chap to pop out a kiddo with. Who was this man who willingly mated with?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Someone actually slept with her willingly? Who is this man and what happened to his groin?
Tassa? Well, PopCross has given me the stink eye, which means I shouldn't say, but you will find out in the not too distant future.
Oh, damn it.
Anyway, she had a kid named Astra, seemingly named after a very powerful type of weapon used by some Hindu gods in Dimension M308, but possibly also just named as an anagram for Tassa. Astra was being raised to take over as the overseer of A016, to make the realm a peaceful place while Tassa lived out the rest of her life sipping Sambuca on a beach or something.
The original.
But Astra noticed something over the years being raised by Tassa that most folks who meet her notice about her. She sucks. So when Tassa finally gave Astra the overseer powers and the multiversal orb, the rebellious plucky gal decided to break the orb into 4 pieces.
Wait, there, right there. I'm not going big because I'd block it, and as you can see, but right here, that's a piece of the orb thing.
And give one of the pieces to Lucifer in his pocket dimension. That quarter of the orb didn't have enough power to let him free, because Tassa put some pretty fierce locks on that pocket dimension, which would come back to bite her later, but it did let him make demons of his own that he could—
Oh, and that's what ended up being locked away. Boom, okay.
Send into the main dimension of A016 to torment the world, which really ticked off Tassa, but what could she do? She gave up most of her powers, and the ones she had left, Astra used her 3 pieces of the multiversal orb to take them away. So Tassa was just a normal power level human, basically. Though, presumably still at the time with muscles that rival Big Dwayne. She did lose those eventually too, though. Like Big Dwayne. So Tassa's powerless, watching Lucifer tear her world apart with demons while her daughter is just overseeing the whole ordeal. But luckily, the world wasn't exactly helpless. A group of humans got organized and made the Agency of Supernatural Protection, or the ASP. A016 didn't have tons of folks with powers, but 2 that they did have was Sterling and Geel and Alexis Jones. Those 2 started using their powers to fight back against Lucifer's demons and to try and figure out who he was and why he was doing what he was doing. In classic Overseer or Archon fashion, Astra started watching him and got real invested in the story of Alexis and Sterling. So she decided to jump into the story herself. Not by doing the honest thing and saying, hey, this whole thing was my fault and I could fix it pretty easily. Instead, she decided to do the incredibly convoluted thing and transform herself to look like Lucifer's daughter, calling herself Diamos. She used her 3 shots of the multiversal orb to rewrite Lucifer's memories to think she truly was his kid. Then played a different sort of rebellious daughter, going to Sterling and Alexis and saying she wanted to help them take down her dear old fake dad. She even started getting frisky with Sterling, who has universally great taste in women, Benny said sarcastically, so they became a couple for a while. Eventually, Astra/Diamos realized what she was doing sucked, because she started to actually care about Sterling and Alexis, but she was also like, well, what can I do, fess up? That ain't really her style at the time. Instead, she faked her death in a big final battle with Lucifer, killed him off, and pretended to die off herself. Then left Dimension A016 to travel around the multiverse with 3 pieces of the multiversal orb and the overseer powers of A016's overseer. She left 1 piece of the multiversal orb back—
Holy damn, this is complicated as all hell, but I love it. I can't stop smiling.
In A016 with Sterling and Alexis, and also left them heartbroken thinking their fake best buddy had sacrificed herself to save the world. Before she popped out of Dimension A016, though, Astra locked Tassa away in the same pocket dimension Lucifer had been trapped in. I don't really know what she was doing for food and stuff, though, if she ain't got no powers. Pop?
Astra probably left her a lot of freeze-dried food. Honestly, before Dresden's storyline, I was kind of only planning out Multiverse Tales like 3 or 4 episodes in advance. Not years in advance like I do now.
Sure, so Tassa was eating lots of gross freeze-dried food or something. I mean, canonically, Tassa did lose a bunch of muscle mass, so I guess she wasn't necessarily eating much. So Astra is out hopping around the multiverse with 3 pieces of the multiversal orb. She ends up chucking one of the pieces when it's malfunctioning into Dimension—
I mean, hell, you could actually just say that there's something in the dimension that generates food. Not a whole lot of food, but enough that keeps the person alive.
K998, where Heath Hurricane Reynolds is from, resulting in him getting superpowers and a bunch of kaiju starting to pop up all over his world. She also gave 1 piece to Professor Dresden Oakland, because those 2 very briefly became buddies, back before Dresden's voice was canonically properly established, because those 2 shared a hatred of other overseers, and of course a hatred of Tassa, who Astra heavily implied to Dresden was dead at this point.
So that's
of course,
what
they
the other
wasn't buddies
piece
for
is.
very long because Dresden pretty quickly realized that Astra was as irresponsible as other overseers, but she still liked to pretend they was friends for a while after that. Now that brings us back around to Dresden and Fia herself's friendship. Fia didn't tell
Yes.
Dresy that she was working with the
Friendship.
Archons, but the Archons also liked the idea of taking out most of the multiverse's overseers before they came in to take physical forms. See, the Archons had basically taken on the mentality of a kid who's built a sandcastle, and now they'd had the fun with it, was bored with it, and wanted to knock that sucker down. They wanted to
And
come
try
into the
again?
multiverse, start tearing it up, and, like Astra, wanted to be a part of the story they'd been witnessing from afar for thousands of years. Overseers don't have anywhere near the power levels
Yeah,
of an Archon,
okay.
but they could make things more complicated for the Archons in terms of them running around to whatever universes they wanted and smashing stuff up with their own armies of demons. Of course, they
Oh,
led
yeah.
Arava, Afia herself, to believe that they weren't going to be that destructive, but, you know, they lied.
Well,
They're
so you
sometimes
thought.
known as demons of deception, so it's a thing they do. Though some of the Archons is more destructive than others, which we'll get to later. So they was already
And some can actually be turned to good, even though it's only happened once.
on board with Dresden's plan, plus Arava needed to get his piece of the multiversal orb, along with the other three pieces, in order to make the physical forms for the Archons. Dresden starts
Yeah,
getting wise
okay.
to the fact that Arava was being kinda shady, and she lets slip that she's on board with the idea of the Archons coming into physical form to shake up the multiverse. Dresden might have had
Yeah, now
his
we got it,
sinister
yeah.
overseer plan cooking, but he was not on board with the Archons coming in. At this point, Dresy had also started having interactions with the Shop Gang. That's the team that I'm a part of. I jokingly
Yep.
named us the Shop Gang, but that name has just kind of stuck and nobody came up with a better one, so here we are, still using it. The core team of us got together in the Battle for the Beast World double feature episode, which was kinda like our first Avengers movie, at the end of which Astra
Avengers
revealed all
Assemble.
the terrible stuff she did to Sterling and Alexis, but also revealed that she was alive and still technically was the overseer of their home dimension, A016. That story
That's
brought
good, at
together
least.
Sterling and Gilles, Alexis Jones, Astra, Heath Hurricane Reynolds, Tayron Janova, Biomech Kayla, aka Michaela Maciel and her Biomech buddy Charlie, and
Yep.
me. Lots more folks
And
has
Benny.
joined the Shop Gang since, like my buddy Vasilia Kuznet, who's from Tayron's Dimension, my boyfriend Dr. Champagne McGregor, and a bunch
congrats.
more, but we ain't got time to cover everyone.
Go
The point
for
is,
the
the
ray
Shop
gun.
Gang was a team at this point, and we're the main characters of Multiverse Tales. Not that you'd know it from how little screen time we've gotten lately.
Yeah, boo-hoo, Benny. I bet if we added it up, you have more screen time than anyone else on the channel because of all your banter episodes.
Fair
Definitely.
enough. Anyway, Dressy's interactions with the Shop Gang, specifically his interactions with Sterling, and with a gal Dresy had wrongfully locked up in Baxel's prison
Ooh.
for 20 years,
Hey,
Unkillable
Kate.
Kate, had Dresy questioning his plan to kill all overseers. Now, we didn't
Oh, yeah, that's
actually
right.
know his plan at the time, but we did know that he had something cooking with overseers and really wasn't a fan of them. So, on Sterling's suggestion, Dresy had a little team-up adventure with member of the Shop Gang, Tayron the Beast Summoner, who at the time
Right.
was the overseer of his world, T905, and was actually doing a real good job taking care of things and definitely wasn't worth murdering just because he was an overseer.
Oh yeah, a
Now,
damn
it's
good
important
job.
to know the burden of an overseer's bond gets passed on with the overseer powers if those powers gets given to someone else. So Tayron had a bond with Dresden, not because he'd made one, but because Tayron's predecessor,
inherited
a
it.
much less pleasant overseer named Eulidas, had made a bond with Old Stoneface. Thankfully, on Sterling's suggestion, Dresy called in Tayron's help with something, so Tayron's bond was closed before Dresy went ahead with killing all the overseers, which
that was
he
close.
did still end up doing, despite seeing how
Damn
there
it.
are good overseers out there who his plan would inevitably end up killing. Still, what, was he gonna give up all the work he'd been doing for the last 6,000 years to put this plan together? I
He
guess
could've.
not. Dresden had made bonds at this point with 16,444 overseers,
Oh, wow,
and he
that's a
called
lot.
all of them in to Baxel's prison, then, kaboom! He did it, wiped out all of them overseers and everyone else that was locked up in Baxel's prison at the time, other than a few token folks he zapped out of there before nuking the place, though the only confirmed person we know he took out is this bird-faced dude named Jerry, who was in the Baxel storyline.
Jerry.
Now, Dresden assumed that after he nuked all the overseers, the Reaper would come and take him out for having done that. But no dice. So instead,
No
he
Reaper?
turned himself into
Huh.
the Shop Gang, feeling guilty
Alright.
and thinking he deserved to be killed by them, but they didn't end up going for that. They wanted to make him spend the rest of his life helping clean up the messes that he'd caused. and whatever other messes the
Reformation.
Shop Gang was facing. So they stripped away his overseer powers using the pieces they had, the multiversal orb, and cue the start of Dresden's redemption arc.
Oh,
But
yeah,
since Dresden did go ahead with the whole
That's
blowing
good.
up all overseers thing early, Fia herself starts making her move to steal the rest of the multiversal orb and finish her plan. Long story short, she gets all of the pieces of the orb in a fight with the Shop Gang, collapses 7 planets in dimension C284, who a certain cat-faced sci-fi man is from, and uses the energy from those planets to create the incredibly powerful demon bodies for the 7 Archons, who—
Oh, okay, that's actually really interesting that she used the power of collapsing worlds to build up bodies. I thought it was a lot less than that, but no, I was completely wrong.
now finally have come into physical reality. Now this was actually enough to finally trigger the Reaper to come after Fia herself, but Fia had planned for that.
Oh crap.
She had cursed a gal from her dimension, D667, named Koshmara Noroi, or Mara for short, with a demon form that had the power to kill the Reaper. One of very few things in the multiverse that could actually pull that off. Now, Mara is a great gal who is a part of the Shop Gang and was at the time. She was brought onto the team by yours truly in a little adventure she and I shared together. So she normally wouldn't have been big on helping Fia out with this whole dealio. Unfortunately, if the Reaper did take out Fia, since she was the overseer of Mara's world, that would mean that Mara and every other living being from her universe would get wiped out too.
Damn.
So Mara had to scrap with the Reaper to stop her from killing Fia. Now Mara didn't actually want to kill the Reaper and take on the role of the Reaper herself, so she was umming and ahhing a bit in this fight about what she was gonna do. But then, out of nowhere, Alexis Jones, field combat leader of the Shop Gang, who is famously opposed to killing anyone with a soul, uses a fancy little knife she'd gotten from Dresden, made from the Reaper's own energy, to kill the Reaper. So now Alexis Jones is the Reaper, and has been training with those powers ever since to get better with them. Thankfully, her no-killing rule conveniently doesn't apply to the Archons, but it is still causing some problems for us in the present day. Hard to have the responsibility of the Reaper when you ain't so down with killing. And we do need her to be the one landing the final blow on the Archons, because like when the Reaper kills an Overseer and that wipes out everything from their universe, when the Reaper kills one of the Archons, that wipes out every demon that they've made.
Yeah, if I actually remember correctly, this was the only demon Archon to actually have been killed, and another one had been turned good, with one more being consumed. That would actually be a spoiler. I won't mention that.
Since taking physical form. If anyone other than Alexis kills one of the Archons, then sure, it's great that they're dead, but all of the demon armies that they've made will stick around and keep wreaking havoc. So we can have lots of folks fighting the Archons, but landing the final blow, that's gotta be Alexis. Anyway, once Alexis iced the Reaper, the Archons and Fia herself destroyed the multiversal orb, then got out of there. Alexis was already a pretty tough cookie at that point, but she wasn't trained with using the Reaper powers, so there was no way she could start tracking down the Archons and going one-on-one with them already. Any of them would have won that fight for sure before she started training with her powers. Sorta luckily, the Archons wanted to have a good fight with Alexis at some point down the line, so they didn't just try and wipe her out then and there. Anyway, so the fight with the Archons and Fia was over, and that was how the double feature event, Nothing to Fear But Fia Herself, wrapped up. The Archons started ravaging the multiverse, and that kicked off the current arc of Multiverse Tales that we've been in for the last 2 years, in terms of you people's listenings time. For us, it's been, what, canonically 6 or 7 months or something?
That's it?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Damn.
Cool. Glad to know you keep such diligent track of the timeline, PopCross. Anyway, in their physical forms as the demons made by Fia herself, the 7 Archons all took on traits similar to storytelling genres, and their demon generals and armies tend to reflect that. The psychological thriller demon, Voxy McAllister, Psychopedalict, was eventually confronted by Fia herself.
As far as I can tell, every single fan of this series loves Psychopedalic.
When she realized the Archons was doing a lot more universe exploding than she'd hoped for when she gave him physical forms. But his reaction was basically just like, haha, sucks for you. And he ended up taking away her Overseer powers and allegedly dispersed the Overseer energy of D667 and made it so nobody can ever become the Overseer of Fia herself's world again. He chucked Fia herself back into a world with very few of her powers left, where she sat on a little island all sad and pouty until the Fia the Demon Hunter storyline started up. More on that later. The shop gang actually was
So
able
nice.
to take out one of the Archons pretty early on, a gal named Sue Vasterif who was based around the superhero genre. They managed
really
to axe
now?
her at my funeral. Don't worry, I got better. But the rest of the Archons has been a struggle. In that fight with Sue Vasterif, they had help from a group called the Film Fatales, who have incredibly
Yeah,
busted
here we go.
superpowers and can basically reshape reality. But almost all of them now has been banished from the multiverse by Psycho
Almost.
because he didn't want him helping the shop gang take out another Archon. One of the Film Fatales did manage to stick around, but more on him in the Trismegistus Academy. Circling back to Dreszy Boy, in the midst of the early fights with the Archon
I was about to spoil who that was. Nah, I'm gonna wait.
forces, Dresden started to see the error of his past ways and started redeeming himself. Eventually he'd done that enough and was being trusted enough that he got permission from the shop gang, as well as got some help from folks at the Trismegistus Academy, again
Built a
we'll
whole
cover
new
later,
foundation.
to start building something called the Redemption Arc Support Foundation, or the RAS Foundation.
That's right.
Named by yours truly. It's like the SCP Foundation, except along with containing real dangerous entities and people from across the multiverse,
It's on
it
some
also
good.
tries to help rehabilitate them to make them positive additions to the multiverse. Now, Dresden is still occasionally having to deal with the consequences of having committed overseer genocide, but
Yeah.
that brings us to where Dreszy is today. Now, another reason
I mean, the dude pretty much killed 17,000 overseers. That's a lot. That's a lot he'll have to pay back forever.
recent-ish piece of lore that's important is the non-physical realm called the Akashic Records. I visited there a couple times with various pals of mine to take a little peek at alternate versions of existence and alternate versions of folks from our group, because this place apparently has a
creepy.
record of everything that ever has happened or ever will happen or ever could happen in our multiverse and others. I mean, sort of. It's kind of a paradoxical place that we ain't exactly supposed to understand, and it exists outside of time.
It's cool,
The
though.
record keeper, who we've chatted with, has said that everyone who visits that place sees it differently based on their own assumptions and perspectives and whatnot. Even the actual record
Alright.
keeper looks different to different folks, since they don't actually got a real physical form. The Akashic Records is where I had my little chat with Kaio Adachi and heard the entire story of Starseed Psyche from him in the post-credit scene of Starseed Psyche.
Oh,
But I
I
guess
remember.
that's technically a spoiler I should have saved till the end of the next video. Anyway, now you've got all the important lore that you need to know before PopCross started focusing more on his original series, giving us way more Multiverse Tales stuff and giving us stuff in another multiverse. So now I can
It's
start
all
breaking down
awesome.
the individual series that has come out since then.
But I'm actually going to cut us off here for today. This video was originally going to be one long video, but I edited together all the audio and it was over an hour and 15 minutes long, so we're splitting this up into two. But now that you know the important
Nah,
stuff in the
it's
timeline,
3.
you could just start watching or reading some of the more recent original
Buy
series.
the books.
The ones that I'll be summarizing in the next video. There's the Summoner's Beasts, Mytholethal, Fear of the Demon Hunters, Vigilance, Starseed Psyche, the Trismegistus Academy, and the Realm of Hopeful Horrors, which might not
Vigilance is literally the only series of his I have not actually watched / listened to. Everything else, I've been diligent.
get summarized next week, we'll see. But anyway, early in all of those stories, even if you didn't watch this entire video, I try to do a pretty good job giving any exposition you need to get into a new series.
Can't
Those
wait.
series playlists are all on my homepage, so check them out if you want. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a question you can ask yourself that I saw on
Ooh.
Instagram called Blooms and Greens by Chloe. And that question is,
Okay.
if I had $100 million in the bank right now, would I stay on the path that I'm on? Would you keep
Oh,
headed
yeah,
in
no,
the
I already know
direction
that.
of the job that you're trying to get, or keep going to school for the same things? It's basically a good question to ask to make sure you're not making all of your decisions.
Weirdly enough, I've actually thought about that exact question long ago and always talked with my family about, just to see what the different people would kind of do. I would actually keep up the life I have. I've continued trying to be a YouTuber for all of you out there. Even though I may only get a few views here and there, I still enjoy it. Anyway, folks, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of you next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.